I climbed into my husband's vehicle and discovered a tube of personal lubricant in the glove compartment. Without a word, I discreetly swapped it for industrial grade superglue. The repercussions of my actions compelled our neighbours to make an urgent call to the fire department. I'm so pleased you've arrived. If you are viewing this broadcast, please bestow a like and subscribe to my channel, and share in the comments section where you are experiencing my narrative of retribution from. I am curious about the extent of its reach. I took my seat at the kitchen table, the house enveloped in a silence as dense as the morning mist, a silence that had become a perpetual unwelcome visitor. The antiquated timepiece adorning the wall, a wedding commemoration from my departed mother, chimed with an unyielding accusatory cadence. Each tick served as a poignant reminder of a life I was coming to believe was an exquisite, meticulously constructed fabrication. My husband Julian had just returned from yet another of his numerous corporate engagements. He appeared not merely fatigued, but profoundly troubled, as though burdened by a secret too immense to carry. His countenance was a testament to exhaustion and guilt, with lines etched around his eyes and mouth that had been absent previously. He discarded his jacket onto the sofa with a weariness that seemed theatrical, loosened his tie as if it were a noose he was desperate to shed, and collapsed onto the bed, the familiar springs lamenting under his weight, without even the pretense of a shower. The faint aroma of his costly cologne lingered, but it was intermingled with an unfamiliar, cloying perfume, a sweet floral scent that felt like an intrusion, a brazen confession of a life I was unaware he was leading. A few minutes later, his gentle snores filled the dwelling, a sound that once offered solace but now seemed a derisive lullaby, a lullaby for a fool. I rose, moving with the quiet, practiced elegance of a spouse of 40 years, and commenced tidying the disarray he had left in the drawing room, his coat, his wallet, his mobile device, his older laptop. The screen of his phone remained illuminated, a new electronic mail, glowing like a sinister harbinger. I expressed my disquiet. Julian had always issued electronic correspondence, stating, "Juliet, all this technological complexity is beyond me. I prefer a simple telephone call." Yet here was an email, plainly visible, a digital phantom from a life I hadn't known he possessed. Driven by a morbid curiosity that felt both improper and essential, I opened it. The message was brief, a mere handful of words that would irrevocably shatter my world. "You were incredible tonight, Dad." It was accompanied by a scarlet heart, a symbol of affection that pierced my own heart with a chilling, sharp ache. I stood frozen as if struck. The digital realm, a cruel mirror, reflected a truth I was too terrified to confront. Dad. The word reverberated in my mind. Who addressed him with such endearment? My thumb trembled as I scrolled down, seeking further revelations, but found none. Merely an enigmatic email address, a jumble of inscrutable characters offering no answers, only more questions. A tremor coursed through me, not from the cold, but from a profound, bone-deep apprehension. It felt as though a frigid gust had breached the integrity of my life, exposing a hidden chamber I had never conceived of. I cast a glance towards the bedroom, observing Julian shift with a snorting exhalation, his face placid and serene, a stark and infuriating counterpoint to the tempest raging within me. My heart hammered like a thief's, a frantic, guilty rhythm. I hastily replaced the phone, my hands shaking so violently I nearly let it fall. I resumed tidying, my actions now mechanical, robotic. I collected his soiled garments for laundering. As I explored the pockets of his trousers, my fingers encountered a folded piece of paper, crisp and new. It was a bill from an upscale steakhouse in San Antonio, bearing that very evening's date. I frowned. San Antonio? He had informed me he was attending a conference in Dallas. A faint, bitter chuckle escaped my lips. Julian detested the drive to Dallas. San Antonio, conversely, was the locale of his mother's former residence before her passing. He harbored cherished memories of that place, a fact he frequently alluded to. But with whom had he dined in San Antonio while deceiving me about his presence in Dallas? The receipt indicated a party of two, a bottle of expensive Cabernet Sauvignon, a wine he had procured for our 10th anniversary, a wine I had never forgotten, and main courses of filet and pasta. I endeavoured to recall the last instance Julian had treated me to such an establishment, perhaps 10 years prior, coinciding with the inauguration of my first patisserie. It was a memory etched in my consciousness, the flickering candlelight, his proud smile, the manner in which he toasted my achievements. Now, that recollection felt tainted, a faded image in a scrapbook of deception. I retrieved my own phone and, with silent, resolute purpose, captured an image of both the receipt and the email. I was loath to accept it, yet a wife's intuition, honed over 40 years, is a deep, primal knowing. Something was amiss, and I was compelled to uncover it. My hands trembled not solely from indignation, but from a profound existential dread. I felt as though I stood at the precipice of a precipice, poised to witness the spectacular disintegration of my entire existence. I proceeded to the garage. Julian's older SUV was still warm, the air thick with the scent of gasoline and that faint, sweet perfume emanating from his attire. I opened the door, a small, cold dread seizing my stomach. I activated my flashlight and meticulously examined every crevice of the driver's seat. Nothing appeared out of the ordinary, merely loose change and an empty water bottle. However, as I reached into the passenger side glove compartment, my fingers brushed against something plastic and yielding. I withdrew it and my heart nearly ceased its beating. A tube of used personal lubricant, its cap bearing dried residue, a sticky, damning piece of evidence. I stood there in the dim garage, contemplating it as if it were a clandestine secret, a tangible manifestation of my most profound anxieties. Julian and I had not shared intimacy in years. He perpetually cited fatigue, attributing his diminished desire to age. So for what purpose was this lubricant intended? The question echoed in my mind, each syllable a hammer blow against my fragile reality. I felt incapacitated yet maintained a clear head, a survival instinct taking hold. I returned it precisely to its original position. I wiped my hands with a napkin, scrubbing them raw, as if fearful the betrayal would leave an indelible mark upon my skin. I continued my search, this time with heightened caution and methodology. Beneath the rear seat, I discovered crumpled napkins, saturated with a sweet floral scent, neither masculine nor my own familiar, delicate rose fragrance. The aroma was alien, defiant, a loud, vulgar declaration of infidelity within the serene sanctuary of our garage. I documented everything photographically. The lubricant, the napkins, as if I could encapsulate the very scent within an image. I closed the car and returned indoors, the weight of the evidence pressing upon me, heavier than any burlap sack of flour I had ever lifted. I resumed my place at the kitchen table, my hands quivering uncontrollably as I picked up Julian's phone once more. By this juncture, I was almost certain of his infidelity. I scrutinized his messages, but found only professional exchanges, sterile and devoid of emotion, much like a barren desert landscape. His inbox was empty, save for that singular, perplexing email. I investigated the sent and draft folders. Nothing. Everything was excessively clean, impeccably maintained, suspiciously so, as if he had meticulously expunged every vestige of his deceit. A master of deception, I mused bitterly. My rage had coalesced into a cold, hard stone within my chest. and a new, more perilous emotion began to stir: a thirst for truth, an imperative to expose the falsehood regardless of the consequences. The following morning, precisely as the sun ascended and its soft luminescence filtered through the window dressings, I was already awake, a phantom within my own domicile. The imagery of the lubricant, the restaurant receipt, and that email continued to swirl in my mind, a venomous carousel of doubt. I stood in the kitchen, my hands occupied, yet my mind a frantic vortex. I prepared a simple repast: 2 fried eggs, toast, and a mug of the robust black coffee that Julian favoured. I had scarcely slept throughout the night. Julian descended, appearing weary, his hair dishevelled, his eyes still groggy. He took his seat at the table, grasped his coffee cup, took a sip, and set it down, half full. "I have a significant appointment today," he announced in a husky tone, a rehearsed phrase he had employed countless times before without meeting my gaze. "I anticipate returning late." He was remarkably adept at this, I reflected. The facile fabrications, the casual demeanour, sent a chill down my spine. I nodded with a strained smile, though my innermost desire was to shriek, "Where is this appointment? With whom? In San Antonio again?" But I restrained myself, my rage a silent inferno, and simply responded, "Very well, be safe." He rose, bestowed a light pat upon my shoulder, a gesture that felt more like an afterthought than an expression of affection, and departed. The door closed, leaving the kitchen in silence and me with a suspicion that was escalating into a monstrous certainty. I cleared the table and washed the dishes one by one, the rhythm of the task providing a small anchor amidst the storm of my emotions. I could not passively remain conjuring theories. I required the unvarnished truth, concrete evidence. I retrieved my phone and sought the number of Mrs. Miller, a confidant from years past who had provided immense support when I first launched my bakery. She had once mentioned a reputable private investigator specializing in infidelity cases. "Juliet," she had said, "if you ever find yourself in need, I can provide Thomas's contact details. He is exceedingly discreet and dependable." I had never envisioned requiring his services, but now I had no alternative. I dialed her number, my voice trembling, each ring a percussive beat, mirroring my escalating anxiety. "Hello, Mrs. Miller. Could you assist me in reaching Thomas? I need him." A brief silence followed, a pause pregnant with unspoken implications before her response. "Juliet, what is occurring? Has Julian done something?" I sighed, reluctant to delve into specifics over the telephone, my pride bruised and raw. "I simply need to know the truth. Can you help me?" Mrs. Miller, a woman of few words but profound intuition, agreed without hesitation, and a mere hour later I received a message from Thomas, requesting a meeting at noon at a small downtown cafe. "Mrs. Roberts," he wrote, "please do not be concerned. I will assist you." The message was concise, yet it offered a modicum of relief, a lifeline in a sea of deception. At noon I arrived at the cafe, a diminutive establishment with worn wooden tables and the aroma of roasted coffee permeating the air, a scent that typically soothed me, but now felt strangely foreign. I selected a secluded corner, hoping to remain unnoticed, a shadow amidst the surrounding light. Thomas entered, a man of middle age, short and stocky, clad in a simple, light blue shirt, his philosophical eyes seemingly capable of discerning everything, of penetrating the veneer of reality. I presented him with a flash drive containing the photographs I had taken the preceding evening, the peculiar email, the restaurant receipt, the lubricant tube, and some napkins. "This is all I possess," I stated, my voice wavering. "I am not entirely certain, but I suspect my husband is being unfaithful." The words tasted like ashes. Thomas nodded, reviewing each image on his phone, his expression impassive, a professional facade concealing his thoughts. He meticulously jotted notes in a small notepad. "Mrs. Roberts, I understand. I will commence surveillance of Mr. Roberts this afternoon. Rest assured, I will inform you as promptly as possible." I met his gaze, endeavoring to suppress the tears that were stinging my eyes. "Thank you," I murmured softly. "I simply wish to know the truth, whatever it may be." Thomas responded with a compassionate look, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "I will exert my utmost effort, return home and refrain from any actions that might arouse suspicion." I departed the cafe and merged with the throng of pedestrians. Yet I experienced a profound loneliness I had never before encountered. 40 years of marital union, a lifetime constructed upon a bedrock of trust, was now crumbling beneath my feet. I had placed my complete faith in Julian. I had always considered him a devoted family man, someone who would stand by me through any adversity. He was my steadfast support, my anchor. And now here I was engaging a stranger to follow my own husband. The irony was a bitter draught to swallow. I felt as though I were trapped in a melodramatic film, a character in a drama for which I had never auditioned. That evening, as I sat in my bakery, the familiar sense of yeast and flour, a constant comforting presence, I reviewed delivery invoices. My phone vibrated. A message from Mr. Thomas. I opened it, my heart pounding at an astonishing rate, blood roaring in my ears. It contained a photograph of Julian, attired in his customary grey shirt, entering an elegant restaurant, his hand entwined with that of a woman. I zoomed in on the image and my heart stopped. It was Alison, my daughter-in-law. She was adorned in a fitted black dress, her makeup bold, her lipstick an intense crimson, her hair unbound. They did not resemble in-laws. Rather, they appeared as a couple on a clandestine rendezvous. Their bodies were angled towards one another, a shared secret passing between them. I sank into my chair, my hand trembling as I clutched the phone. "Alison, how could this be?" At family gatherings, she and Julian maintained an air of distance, their interactions minimal. I now understood it had all been a masterful performance, a charade orchestrated for my benefit. Mr. Thomas dispatched further images. In one, they were seated at a secluded table, adorned with candles and blossoms. Alison was leaning towards him, smiling, while Julian raised his glass in a toast, his gaze possessing an uncharacteristic tenderness. Upon witnessing this photograph, a crushing weight descended upon my chest. In 40 years, I had never witnessed him regard me in such a manner, not even in our youth, when I was that girl from San Diego, with my flowing hair and radiant smile. He had looked at me that way, with genuine adoration, with a love I believed was exclusively mine. Now it belonged to her. In the dead of night, a video arrived from Mr. Thomas. The clock on the wall indicated 2 a.m. I donned my headphones, a desperate endeavor to maintain the secrecy of the revelations, and initiated playback. My hands were so unsteady I nearly dropped the phone. In the video, Alison leaned close to Julian's ear, whispering something that elicited a loud laugh from him, a sound utterly foreign to me. Her voice was sweet, her eyes sparkling under the restaurant's illumination. They then rose and departed, and Julian, ever the gentleman, opened the car door for her as if she were a lady and he her devoted lover. I replayed the video repeatedly, a form of self-inflicted torment. Each viewing felt like another piercing stab to the heart. Alison, my daughter-in-law, whom I had nurtured like my own daughter, whom I had instructed in the preparation of our family's traditional flan, and Julian, the man to whom I had dedicated my entire existence, with whom I had forged a family. What transpired behind my back? Behind Daniel's back? The questions descended like a tidal wave, threatening to engulf me. I meticulously saved all the photographs and the video onto a flash drive, meticulously noting every detail: the date, the time, the location, even the name of the establishment. My hands worked on autopilot, but my mind was in utter disarray. I was unwilling to accept it. I could not fathom Julian and Allison capable of such profound depravity, such callous cruelty. Yet the evidence lay before me undeniable, a veritable mountain of proof. I remained in the bakery, surrounded by trays of delectable pastries that released tantalizing aromas. Yet I felt as though my world was disintegrating. I recalled the early days of my business, when Julian would assist me in transporting sacks of flour, when we would share laughter in that small kitchen, our aspirations as boundless as the heavens. Now all of it seemed like a distant memory, a beautiful fabrication I had inhabited for far too long. The subsequent morning, I found myself in the compact kitchen of the bakery, perusing an order list destined for a prominent hotel downtown. The familiar scent of flour and vanilla, which invariably brought me a sense of peace, felt hollow that day, a consolation devoid of substance. The moment I concluded signing the delivery invoice, my phone vibrated in the pocket of my apron. I wiped my hands and my heart sank upon seeing it was a message from the investigator. A single, concise sentence. "Mrs. Roberts, I am forwarding additional evidence." I took a deep, fortifying breath, striving to maintain composure, but my hands trembled as I opened the message. A sequence of photographs materialized on the screen. The initial image depicted Julian in his usual grey shirt, exiting a law firm situated near the main plaza. Beside him was Allison, clad in a beige office dress, her hair pulled back into a high ponytail, and enormous dark sunglasses that nearly obscured her face, a pathetic attempt at anonymity. They were walking in very close proximity, not as in-laws, but as a couple. Their postures testified to their forbidden connection. The subsequent photograph revealed them standing before a 4-star hotel, its glass doors gleaming and its signage rendered in gold. I zoomed in, desperately seeking any indication to refute what I was witnessing, but found none. They appeared excessively natural, too at ease in each other's presence, integral to a world from which I was excluded. Then a brief video from Mr. Thomas appeared. I pressed play, and my heart hammered with such ferocity I feared it would burst, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. The shot was taken from a distance, yet it was sufficiently clear to discern Julian and Allison on the 3rd-floor balcony of the hotel. His arm was encircling her waist, and she rested her head upon his shoulder, her long hair gently swaying in the breeze. And then, like a sharp blow, I witnessed them share a swift kiss, making no effort to conceal their actions. It was a fleeting embrace, but it was enough to extinguish the final ember of hope I still harbored. I replayed the video frame by frame, each image etching itself deeper into my soul, a slow, agonizing descent into despair. The curtain in the room parted slightly, and Allison emerged, rushing to embrace Julian, her face radiant with joy, as if she were a young maiden in the throes of love. I slumped into the chair, gripping the edge of the table to prevent myself from collapsing. Mr. Thomas had written, "They also secured the room for the afternoon. It appears they will be staying the night. I will continue to monitor them." I reread the message multiple times, my throat constricted, as if I were being strangled. Merely a few hours prior, Julian had texted me, "Julia, I will not be returning home tonight. I must meet a potential business associate from out of town. Please get some rest." The tone was affectionate and solicitous, precisely as it had been for years, but now I understood it was all a fabrication, a meticulously crafted lie. A potential associate from out of town. He was not out of town. He was here in a 4-star hotel with our own daughter-in-law. I opened my portable hard drive and carefully saved every photograph and every video. Each time I executed the save function, I scrutinized the image as if to confirm I was not dreaming. In the video, Julian's gaze directed at Alison was so tender. The way he caressed her hair evoked memories of how he used to do so with me over 30 years ago. We were young, and I believed our love would endure eternally. A promise whispered beneath a starlit San Diego sky. Witnessing this now, all I perceived were lies and overt betrayal. I recalled family gatherings, everyone seated around the table, a tableau of our ostensibly perfect family. Alison invariably sat at a considerable distance from Julian. At times she even regarded him with what appeared to be disdain. Daniel would often jest, "Mum, I believe Alison cannot tolerate Dad. She avoids him like the plague." I had believed him too. I had assumed they simply did not get along, that she was merely attempting to integrate into the family. But now I comprehended that it had all been a pretense, a meticulously choreographed dance of deceit. They had performed their roles with remarkable skill in front of me, in front of Daniel, in front of the entire neighborhood. I felt like a colossal fool, a wife rendered blind, betrayed by 2 traitors directly before my very eyes. People were going about their lives, oblivious to the unfolding events on that hotel balcony. But Mr. Thomas, like a silent hunter, had captured the quintessential moment, a snapshot of my shattered reality. I responded to him, "Thank you. Please continue your surveillance. I need to know everything." He replied tersely, "I will. Remain calm." That night, I returned to the house that had been my shared residence with Julian. It felt alien now, a repository of phantoms and falsehoods. I opened the dresser drawer and retrieved a thick envelope, my hands moving with a grim resolve. I meticulously compiled all the incriminating evidence, including snapshots of Julian and Alison exiting the legal counsel's establishment, their arrival at the lodging, their presence on the veranda, and every single second of the video footage. I meticulously organized these items, sealed the dossier, and concealed it deep within a drawer, beneath a collection of cherished family photographs. My gaze fell upon a framed image capturing a moment from a few years prior. Myself, Julian, Alison, and Daniel, all present at Daniel's birthday celebration. Alison was radiating happiness, embracing Daniel with affectionate warmth, while Julian stood close by, his arm resting on my shoulder, a look of palpable pride on his countenance. Upon reflection now, all I felt was an overwhelming urge to rend that photograph asunder, to excise the depiction of their joyful visages from my existence. The following daybreak, mere moments before the first hint of dawn, I detected the subtle creak of the main entrance yielding. Julian, reeking of spirits, stumbled in. "My associate proved excessively recalcitrant, Juliet," he grumbled in a voice hoarse with fatigue, his eyes bloodshot, suggesting an all-night vigil. I found myself compelled to imbibe significantly. I am utterly spent. I was in the commissary, a vessel of water in my hand, observing his performance, feeling as though each action was a deliberate aggravation of my distress. "Seek repose," I responded with my customary placidity, the practiced tone of a devoted spouse. "You are required at your professional duties tomorrow." He offered a mere nod, administered a perfunctory pat to my shoulder as if no transgression had occurred, and then trudged towards the sleeping quarters. Mere minutes later, his slumber was punctuated by sonorous snores, as though he had never betrayed my trust, nor sought illicit rendezvous with our own daughter-in-law. Once I was assured of Julian's profound unconsciousness. My mobile device vibrated. It was an incoming communication from the private investigator, Mr. Thomas. His tone was hushed barely above a whisper, as if he were apprehensive of being overheard. Mrs. Roberts, I managed to record their discourse within the hotel's parking facility. Specialized instrumentation was employed. They remained entirely unaware. I am transmitting the recording to you presently. My pulse quickened, yet I responded with measured composure. My sincere gratitude, Thomas. Please dispatch the file. Moments later, an audio file materialized within my messaging interface. Donning my headphones, I settled at the table and initiated playback. The initial sound that registered was Allison's voice, devoid of warmth and driven by avarice, the tone of an utter stranger. Father, expedite the execution of that fabricated accord. I am eager to assume proprietorship of that entire network of emporiums without delay. I wish for that aged shrew to be removed from the domicile. A sharp pang struck my chest, and I clutched the device with considerable force. Subsequently, Julian's voice resonated, deep and assured. Dismiss your anxieties regarding those documents. Juliet possesses no inkling of the machinations. Entrust their management to my discretion. Her faith in me is exceedingly profound. This revelation felt akin to a blade twisting in the very core of my being. It transpired that they were not merely engaged in infidelity. Their machinations extended to expropriating all that I had painstakingly constructed. The entire chain of bakeries, all the arduous toil, the shed tears, the countless sleepless nights, the meticulous preparation of each individual confection, the ceaseless journeys across the city to ensure timely deliveries, all in the pursuit of preserving my hard-won reputation. This enterprise was unequivocally mine. Julian had never once soiled his hands in the culinary sphere. He had never served patrons at the counter, nor negotiated contracts with hospitality establishments. And now he and Allison conspired to divest me of it all, to banish me from the very residence that had become my sanctuary. I verged on succumbing to despair, yet I retained sufficient fortitude to duplicate the audio recording onto the portable storage device that housed my other incriminating proofs. With deliberate care, I noted the precise time and location, as though seeking to anchor myself amidst the tempest. The subsequent morn, while preparing the morning infusion at the bakery, my phone vibrated once more. Thomas had transmitted an additional compilation of recent photographic captures procured via a telephoto lens. In these images, Julian and Allison were situated within his vehicle, a substantial stack of documents spread before them. Allison, armed with a crimson marker, was diligently annotating the parchment. Julian, seated beside her, offered a congruent nod and a smile, conveying complete accord. Thomas appended a communiqué. I chanced to overhear a snippet of conversation. It appears they intend to leverage a contact within the notary's office to facilitate the transfer. I shall endeavour to ascertain further details. I magnified the photograph. Though the characters upon the documents remained indistinct, I inferred that these were not standard professional papers. Their intention was clear: to systematically pilfer everything I had laboured to achieve. I remained seated amidst the glistening trays of delectable pastries, their aroma filling the air. Yet I experienced a profound sense of my entire world disintegrating. I reinitiated the audio file, donned my headphones, and listened intently to each utterance, to every word they exchanged. That wretched old woman. That was Allison's appellation for me. I recalled the initial days of her integration into our family, the moments I dedicated to instructing her in the preparation of rice, the affectionate embrace I bestowed upon her, considering her as a daughter. I had envisioned her as an integral member of our household, the woman who, alongside Daniel, would forge a shared future, and Julian, the man I had cherished since my youth in San Diego, who had pledged his eternal devotion. They had rendered me an object of ridicule, a gullible soul, still clinging to the vestiges of belief in love and familial bonds. A regular patron, Mrs. Peterson, who consistently procured confections for her grandchildren, entered the establishment. "Juliet, your bakery has been exceptionally bustling of late. Your chain of establishments is undergoing significant expansion. I am immensely proud of your accomplishments," she remarked, her voice imbued with genuine warmth. I manufactured a smile and responded, "My deepest thanks. I am striving to the best of my capabilities." Internally, however, I was utterly undone. I pondered what her perception of me would be were she privy to the unvarnished truth. Would she regard me as a formidable woman, or merely a pitiable dupe, betrayed by her husband and daughter-in-law? I carefully packaged Mrs. Peterson's selections, bid her farewell at the portal, and then collapsed into my chair, my hands clasped to my head. An overwhelming desire to weep welled within me, yet no tears emerged. Instead, a profound, silent fury smoldered within my breast, akin to the intense heat of an oven, poised for ignition at any moment. That evening at the dinner table, I was seated opposite Julian in the confined galley, illuminated by a solitary bulb, casting an uncanny, distorted luminescence upon his features. He consumed his meal and conversed in a monotone, as though no disruption were imminent, as though the world were not poised on the precipice of his downfall. "Juliet, I must affix my signature to several crucial business instruments this week. Perhaps you ought to review them. They are rather intricate." I retrieved a piece of bread, feigning a bite, while inwardly Allison's voice from the recording echoed incessantly. "Father, expedite the signing of those fraudulent contracts." I recognized his maneuver. He was probing the waters, attempting to ensnare me in the web of his perfidious scheme. I offered him a semblance of a smile, a carefully constructed facade of a wife, too weary for contention, and replied, "Indeed, I shall peruse them at a later juncture. I find myself quite fatigued." Presently, he inclined his head, took a sip of wine, and regarded me as though no deception were afoot. Yet I was acutely aware that concealed behind that seemingly innocuous expression was a man poised to seize all that I had meticulously built, a predator, lying in wait for the opportune instant to strike. Julian partook of several more glasses of wine. His complexion flushed and his pronouncements became slurred, recounting a disagreeable encounter with a particularly demanding client earlier that day. I offered placid nods, as if engrossed in his narrative, yet internally a visceral urge to exclaim, "Do you truly perceive me as so utterly imbecilic?" arose. As he rose, unsteady on his feet, and proceeded to the bedroom, I cleared the table, my movements deliberate and measured, suppressing the tempest of indignation that surged within me. He flung himself onto the bed, his snores resonating loudly, and carelessly deposited his car keys on the nightstand, their metallic sheen glinting under the subdued illumination, an irresistible siren call to my impending retribution. I fixed my gaze upon them, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This was my opening, my designated moment. I entered the sleeping chamber with deliberate stealth, taking pains to avoid any audible disturbance. Each step felt as though I were treading the delicate boundary between profound hurt and unyielding resolve, navigating the chasm between a lingering past and an uncharted nascent future. I procured the keys, clasped them tightly within my palm, and proceeded directly to the garage. The night was remarkably tranquil, enveloped in a profound hush, as though the entire world were holding its breath. The only discernible sound was the incessant chirping of crickets from the periphery, their serenade providing a somber accompaniment to my silent, smouldering wrath. I activated the illumination on my mobile device, Its feeble beam cast a spectral glow upon Julian's aged sport utility vehicle and silent accomplice in his profound act of betrayal. I opened the vehicle's door. The lingering aroma of petroleum mingled with a peculiar sweet fragrance. I reached into the glove compartment, situated between the seats, and there it lay. A tube of lubricating agent, its cap loose, a dried residue clinging to its rim, a tangible testament to their illicit dalliance. I lifted it, feeling as though I were grasping a deeply unsettling secret. It was patently evident that they had employed it once more, confirming that Julian and Alison were continuing their clandestine affair, their perverse game of deception. I transported the tube of lubricant to the culinary workspace, placed it upon the counter, and commenced cleansing my hands with lemon-scented soap. I scrubbed them assiduously, as if endeavoring to expunge every trace of the perfidy I had just encountered. The refreshing fragrance, however, offered no solace to my burgeoning fury, though it did serve to sharpen my focus. I retrieved a tube of potent industrial adhesive from the implements drawer, the very same variety I had once utilized to repair a fractured chair at the bakery. It was a tool of my profession, now repurposed as an instrument of my vengeance. With meticulous care, I unscrewed the cap of the lubricant container and proceeded to fill the tube with the adhesive, drop by painstaking drop, until it was completely saturated. I wiped the nozzle, gave it a gentle shake to ensure thorough admixture, and performed a discreet test. It emerged with seamless fluidity, indistinguishable from the original lubricant. At a cursory glance, no observer would detect any deviation. A faint smile graced my lips, though a veritable hurricane raged within my soul. This was not merely a game. It represented the inaugural stride towards reclaiming my rightful justice. I returned the modified tube to its original position within the glove compartment, meticulously readjusted the floor mat and the seating to their prior configuration, creating the illusion that the vehicle had remained undisturbed before closing the door. I then opened the rear compartment to conduct a final inspection. Within, I discovered only crumpled shopping bags, an expended water bottle, and an unused condom resting forlornly in a corner. My heart gave an involuntary leap, yet I experienced no profound astonishment. I documented these findings with photographic captures using my mobile device, adding them to the ever-expanding repository of evidence. Each image served as a stark reminder, a reinforcing conviction that Julian and Alison would not escape the consequences of their mendacity. Re-entering the domicile, I reinstated the keys to their designated location beside Julian's bedside chronometer. I retrieved a well-worn literary volume and settled onto the seating arrangement in the reception area, affecting an air of absorption in my reading. The dim illumination cast its pallor upon the pages, yet the words remained an unintelligible blur. My mind reeled. I contemplated Daniel, my son who harbored the innocent belief that his union with Alison was one of unadulterated happiness, entirely oblivious to the devastating truth. How could I possibly convey to him that his wife and his own father were engaged in such egregious deceit? My thoughts then turned to the bakery chain, to the 40 years of unwavering dedication and countless sleepless nights, to the numerous confrontations with Julian, all in defense of my cherished ambition. He had never truly comprehended its significance, yet I had harbored the conviction that he offered his unwavering support. Now, I understood with chilling clarity, he had merely been biding his time, awaiting the opportune moment to seize it all. Approximately an hour later, Julian stirred and ambled into the culinary annex in search of hydration. He observed the keys resting upon the counter, betraying no hint of suspicion. "Still experiencing wakefulness, Juliet?" he inquired, his voice laced with lethargy. I offered a smile and replied, Indeed, I am merely engaged in a brief period of perusal. Please conclude your repast and retire to slumber. He inclined his head, imbibed his beverage, and retreated to the sleeping quarters, his snores resuming with immediate alacrity. I regarded him with the detachment one might reserve for a complete stranger. This individual, who had once pledged his lifelong companionship, was now actively plotting the annihilation of all that I held most dear. However, he remained unaware that I had already initiated my counteroffensive. At the advent of dawn, I arose. The nascent sunlight timidly penetrated the glass panes of the bakery. I found myself in my familiar culinary sanctuary, rhythmically kneading dough, meticulously preparing the flame and the sweet pastries, destined for a substantial catering order at a prominent hotel. I pressed the dough with every iota of my strength, channeling the potent force of my fury into each deliberate movement. Upon my return to the domicile for the morning repast, I made a concerted effort to maintain an outward semblance of serenity. Julian was already awake, a cup of potent black coffee cradled in his hand. I served him eggs and toasted bread. "Julian," I stated with measured calmness, "I must undertake a journey to Nashville tomorrow to finalize an agreement with a new associate. I anticipate a rather late return. Would it be permissible for you to assume responsibility for the evening meal?" I observed him covertly from the periphery of my vision. He looked up, an expression of surprise gracing his features, yet within his eyes a distinct luminescence shimmered that bore no resemblance to concern. It was rather a palpable sense of relief. "A substantial contract, you say?" he inquired, extending his hand to grasp mine with a pretense of affection. "Do not concern yourself. Proceed with your arrangements. I shall manage the domestic affairs." However, that flicker within his gaze, that subtle upturn of his lips, suggesting the alleviation of a significant burden, pierced my very soul. His desire for my absence was undeniable, and I comprehended the underlying motive with absolute clarity. I offered a smile and a nod. "My profound thanks. I shall contact you should my return be protracted." He took another measured sip of coffee. Subsequently, he rose, stating his intention to depart for the office at an early hour. As he departed, I noticed his mobile device had been left upon the table, its screen illuminated by a missed call. The designation displayed was AT. A frown creased my brow. My heart commenced an erratic pounding. Alison Thomas, I harbored no doubt of her identity. Before I could even contemplate reaching for the device, Julian reappeared, snatched it with haste, and deactivated the screen directly before me. "I had overlooked it," he mumbled, offering a forced smile, and then he was gone. I remained rooted to the spot, observing the closing of the door, the sensation akin to a forceful blow to my being. He was no longer even endeavoring to conceal his duplicity. That day I operated with the mechanical efficiency of an automaton, delivering baked goods, endorsing invoices, and offering superficial smiles to my clientele. Yet my thoughts remained exclusively preoccupied with Julian and Alison. I could not permit their charade to persist, enacted behind my back and that of Daniel. I required further corroboration, audible evidence of their confessions uttered when they believed themselves unobserved. That evening I feigned profound exhaustion. I retired to bed at an early hour, informing Julian, "I must awaken prematurely tomorrow to catch the omnibus, hence my intention to retire for the evening." He nodded, bestowing a perfunctory pat upon my shoulder. "Seek your rest, Juliet. Exercise caution during your sojourn tomorrow." I reclined and closed my eyes, yet I heightened my auditory faculties, attuning myself to every subtle sound within the confines of the dwelling. Approaching midnight, as Julian's snores subsided, I detected his quiet egress from the sleeping chamber. The faint luminescence emanating from his mobile device cast a dim glow in the pervasive darkness. He departed the room, his phone in hand, under the mistaken impression that I was slumbering. I remained immobile, my pulse thrumming with anxious anticipation. Then, with deliberate slowness, I rose and followed him on silent footsteps. I concealed myself behind the thick drapery in the common area and observed him standing in a shadowed alcove near the window. He brought the phone to his ear and spoke in hushed tones. "Yes, certainly. Make your way to the residence tomorrow. We shall no longer be required to frequent a hotel. Juliet is scheduled to depart the city to finalize a contract and will not return until a late hour." From the other end of the line, I discerned a soft, amused titter. Allison's saccharine voice. "That is indeed excellent news, Father. At long last, we may indulge in a period of unburdened relaxation." Julian chuckled, responding, "Indeed, arrive with the dawn. I shall be awaiting your presence." I stood there, concealed behind the drapery, feeling the inferno of my rage ignite. They were not merely perpetrating infidelity. Their machinations extended to transforming my home, my son's sanctuary, and indeed my own, into their clandestine meeting place. I retreated to the sleeping quarters with silent deliberation, opened a drawer and retrieved Daniel's old recording device, the very instrument I had procured for him during his university years to capture his lectures. I inspected the battery, inserted a fresh one, and activated its continuous recording function. I concealed it behind the bookshelf in the bedroom, positioned adjacent to the headboard, confident that it would capture every clandestine utterance. With meticulous care, I arranged the cable and artfully concealed it beneath a framed family photograph. The image depicted the four of us at Daniel and Allison's nuptials. Gazing upon it now, a profound bitterness washed over me. Allison's radiant smile, Julian's embrace, all of it now revealed as an elaborate fabrication. Before returning to my repose, I conducted a final verification of the recorder's operational status. I meticulously adjusted the photo frame to ensure the cable remained artfully concealed. Then I lay down, feigning deep slumber. Julian re-entered the bedroom, collapsed onto the bed, and resumed snoring as though no disquiet had transpired. Yet my eyes remained wide open in the darkness, more keenly aware than ever. I reached for the bedside clock and set the alarm for a considerably earlier hour than my usual awakening. I closed my eyes, not in an attempt to find rest, but in preparation. I was poised for the subsequent phase of my meticulously crafted strategy. I awoke at 5 o'clock in the morning, while the world was still enshrouded in darkness. Only the faint, diffused glow from the streetlights filtered through the window pane. The house remained utterly silent. The sole auditory sensation was Julian's steady, sonorous snoring emanating from the bedroom. I found myself in the culinary annex, a cup of chilled coffee clasped in my hand, my gaze fixed intently upon the skillet of oil already situated upon the stovetop. This was the final, crucial component of my elaborate scheme, a deceptively simple smoke deterrent, yet sufficient to unmask the truth. I affixed a slender length of string to the igniter of the stove. I then carefully guided it across the expanse of the window and secured it to a substantial object, an old coffee can discovered within the cabinetry. All that remained was to execute a swift pull, thereby igniting the oil and generating a dense plume of black smoke, ample enough to alert the surrounding neighbors. I slightly ajar the window adjacent to the stovetop, ensuring a conduit for the egress of the smoke. Subsequently, I conducted a preliminary test. The smoke ascended with remarkable rapidity, forming swirling patterns reminiscent of an ominous warning. I immediately deactivated the ignition, performed a thorough re-inspection of all elements, and meticulously ensured that no discernible trace remained that might arouse Julian's suspicion. I donned a jacket, gathered my sizable handbag, and proceeded to simulate the act of departing for my purported business trip. Before exiting the premises, I entered the sleeping chamber and gently roused Julian from his slumber. "I must depart for the bus terminal imminently," I stated in a voice imbued with cultivated calmness. "I am proceeding to finalize a contractual agreement. It is highly probable that I shall not return until late this evening." He opened his eyes and, in a voice thick with residual sleep, responded, "Very well, exercise utmost caution, Juliet. Contact me should any necessity arise." He then burrowed his face back into his pillow, lapsing once more into unconsciousness. I cast a final glance at the man I had once cherished and trusted implicitly. Now, reposing there, utterly oblivious to the intricate trap that lay awaiting him, I turned away, my heart heavy with a sorrow that transcended mere sadness, yet my legs remained remarkably steady. Instead of proceeding to the bus station, I made my way across the thoroughfare to the residence of Mrs. Peterson. She was not only my neighbour, but also a confidant. She opened the door, her brow furrowed with concern as she observed my handbag. "Juliet, what are you doing out so early? Is something amiss?" she inquired, her tone laced with genuine affection. I managed a faint smile. "Mrs. Peterson, would it be permissible for me to remain at your abode for a few hours? I feel compelled to observe my residence." She presented a perplexed frown, yet offered no further verbal inquiry. She then poured me a steaming cup of coffee and gestured towards a chair by the window. From this vantage point, I possessed an unobstructed view of the entryway to my home, the very portal through which Julian and Alison would soon enter, and where the unvarnished truth would be irrevocably revealed. Approximately at 10 o'clock, a taxicab materialized at the front of the house. Alison emerged, attired in a demure floral-patterned dress and dark sunglasses, as though she were attempting to elude recognition. Julian opened the door, surveyed his surroundings with a palpable sense of urgency, and swiftly ushered her inside. I gripped my coffee cup with a vice-like intensity, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "The hour has arrived," I murmured, and with a swift motion, activated the application on my mobile device, which was synchronized with the clandestine recording device I had secreted within the bedroom. The audio feed commenced flowing into my headphones. Alison's effervescent laughter, the distinct clinking of glassware, the heavy cadence of approaching footsteps. Subsequently, I distinctly heard Julian's resonant voice. "Very well. The necessity of discreet rendezvous in hotels has been obviated." Alison responded with a peal of laughter. "You possess an uncanny knack for selecting the opportune moments. The aged shrew has departed the premises, has she not?" I bit down sharply on my lip, restraining the surge of fury that threatened to engulf me as I registered her contemptuous appellation for me. Then the mattress began to creak audibly, accompanied by a series of other sounds that I found utterly abhorrent to continue processing. I closed my eyes, drew a deep, fortifying breath, and admonished myself internally. "Endure for a short while longer, Juliet, merely a little longer." A few moments later, a sudden, piercing shriek escaped Alison's lips. "What in the blazes is this? We appear to be immobilized." Her voice was saturated with sheer panic, bordering on audible sobs. Julian emitted a guttural growl. "Cease your lamentations. Wait. Allow me to ascertain the nature of this predicament." A triumphant smile spread across my face. With minimal effort, I tapped my mobile device, remotely activating the smoke dispersion apparatus. The string pulled taut, the stovetop ignited, the skillet of oil burst into flames. A voluminous plume of black smoke billowed forth from the kitchen window in dense, swirling columns, rapidly disseminating outward like an urgent alarm signal. Mrs. Peterson gasped audibly. She peered intently out the window. "Juliet, your residence is engulfed in flames." I affected an outward display of alarm, yet internally a profound sense of tranquility washed over me. Neighbors began to emerge from their respective dwellings, shouting in agitated tones, "Juliet's house is ablaze! Summon the fire brigade immediately!" A gentleman situated nearby, Mr. Miller, swiftly retrieved his mobile device and contacted the municipal fire department. I remained steadfastly in place, my coffee cup clutched tightly, my gaze riveted upon my home. Every element of my plan was unfolding with flawless precision. Within my headphones, Allison's voice grew increasingly desperate. "Julian, you must intervene. I am utterly unable to extricate myself." Julian's voice boomed in response. "Refrain from vocalizing your distress. I am endeavoring to resolve this." Yet I was fully aware of their utter helplessness. The industrial superglue, which I had discreetly substituted, was now exerting its potent effect, ensnaring them at their most ignominious juncture. I envisioned their frantic struggles, their palpable terror, and a peculiar sense of vindication permeated my being. Not due to any innate cruelty, but rather because they had driven me to this extreme. They sought to pilfer my bakery, my family, and even my very honor. Now I would exact retribution. I directed my gaze outward through the window. The smoke continued its relentless ascent, increasing in density. The neighbors congregated in an agitated cluster, their voices a cacophony of panicked exclamations. "What has transpired?" someone inquired. "Where is Juliet?" "She has departed the city on urgent business." "That is precisely what I ascertained," another responded. Mrs. Peterson, standing beside me, regarded me with a gaze tinged with suspicion, yet she offered no verbal commentary. She merely squeezed my hand gently. I understood that she harbored a prescient suspicion, but I felt no need to offer her any explicit clarification. The truth was poised to erupt, and I was thoroughly prepared. A mere 10 minutes later, the piercing siren of a fire engine echoed from the far end of the street, a somber harbinger of impending consequence. The crimson vehicle accelerated rapidly and executed a controlled skid to a halt directly before my residence. Daniel, clad in his fire chief attire, leaped from the vehicle, his expression etched with strain. My son's voice, firm and commanding, cut through the air. "Prepare the equipment swiftly. There may be individuals trapped inside." A pang, sharp and piercing, struck me as I met his gaze. My son, ever the pillar of pride for his family and parents, was about to confront a harsh and unforgiving reality. My instinct screamed to embrace him, to utter a plea of apology to Daniel. Yet I was bound by circumstance, compelled to remain an immobile observer, allowing events to unfold as orchestrated. The kitchen continued to spew thick plumes of smoke, convincingly signaling a significant conflagration to Daniel and his unit. With a powerful swing, my son shattered the front door using a sledgehammer, the resounding splintering of wood a stark announcement. His team followed closely, bearing hoses and extinguishers. From the bedroom, a cacophony of sounds reached me, Julian's desperate pleas intermingled with Allison's heartbroken sobs. "Do something, Julian," I urged silently. "I'm incapable of movement." Julian's growl responded, "Silence! Cease your screaming!" I pressed my lips together, tightening my grip on the phone that relayed the audio from the concealed microphone. They were ensnared, powerless, precisely as I had foreseen. Daniel's entry into the bedroom was followed by my mental reconstruction of the scene. His own father and his wife, entwined in a compromising embrace on the bed, their faces contorted with a mixture of agony and fear. Though I was physically absent, Daniel's voice, strained and disbelieving, echoed through my headphones. What is this?" A firefighter behind him whispered in utter astonishment, "Good heavens!" Another, unable to contain his shock, emitted a nervous chuckle, but Daniel's sharp command immediately silenced him. "Quiet." I understood that his outburst was not merely for maintaining discipline, but a final desperate attempt to mask his profound hurt. The indignity was no longer a private matter. It was laid bare before Daniel, his entire team, and the entire neighborhood. A firefighter emerged, reporting to Daniel, "Chief, the smoke is now under control. It was merely a minor grease fire, nothing significant." Daniel, however, remained unresponsive. I surmised the young man was still within the bedroom, paralyzed by the revelation. Spectators began to gather, a throng at the doorway, pointing and murmuring. "What's transpiring?" "It's Julian and his daughter-in-law," a woman exclaimed, her voice resonating with disbelief. "Oh my goodness, how could this have possibly happened?" another chimed in. Mrs. Peterson, standing beside me, discreetly retrieved her phone, initiating a recording and inching the camera closer to Julian and Allison, who were writhing on the bed, their features twisted in distress. She then turned to me, her eyes conveying a mixture of pity and accusation. "Juliet, you were aware of this, weren't you?" I offered no verbal response, merely a subtle nod, my gaze fixed on the window. Daniel emerged from the bedroom, the distinct thud of his boots on the hardwood floor audible. Through my earpiece, Julian's raspy voice pleaded, "Evacuate everyone! Close the door, Daniel!" But it was far too late. The entire neighborhood had converged, their faces etched with contempt, their whispers forming a chorus of shame. "Father-in-law and daughter-in-law caught in the act. Unbelievable," declared a man. "Poor Juliet, how did it ever come to this?" Another sighed sympathetically. The firefighters, after a brief pause, were compelled to intervene. They draped sheets around Julian and Allison, attempting to conceal their fused bodies, and then carried them out on stretchers. Allison's heart-wrenching sobs and groans of pain were palpable. "Please do something. I cannot endure this any longer." Julian weakly mumbled, "Prevent anyone from seeing us." However, the entire neighborhood had already borne witness. Expressions of disgust, derisive laughter, and disappointed headshakes were prevalent. They were transported, covered by a thin sheet, amidst a rising tide of murmurs. "What a disgrace! Father-in-law and daughter-in-law! My God, how utterly revolting!" The crowd lingered by the entrance as the ambulance departed, its siren wailing. Amidst the clamor, bursts of laughter pierced the air. "What a spectacle!" declared Mr. Miller. "I cannot fathom the existence of two individuals so utterly devoid of shame." An elderly woman, shaking her head, confided to her companion, "Poor Juliet." I stood amongst the onlookers, feigning surprise as if I had just arrived from the bus station. Daniel remained frozen in the yard, his arms hanging limply, his countenance ashen. His teammates averted their gazes, silently collecting their equipment. I understood that Daniel's shock stemmed not only from the sight of his father and his wife bound together, but from the profound double betrayal by the two individuals he held most dear. My urge to run to him, to offer solace and an apology for allowing him to witness such a scene, was suppressed. Instead, I followed Mrs. Peterson, who silently escorted me to the hospital. We occupied seats in the hallway on the third floor, I maintaining the facade of a concerned wife whose home had just been ravaged by fire. Hours later, a physician emerged, his forehead beaded with perspiration. He addressed me in a low tone. "Mrs. Roberts, we have succeeded in separating them. Fortunately, there are no severe injuries. They will require only a topical ointment." I offered a nod of feigned relief, subtly reaching into my purse, my fingers brushing against 2 tubes of thick mustard I had brought. "Thank you, doctor." I managed, my voice quavering to conceal my intentions. May I see them? He gestured me towards the nurse's station where I was provided with 2 tubes of ointment. The young nurse regarded me with sympathy. Ma'am, this is an exceptionally challenging situation. I am truly sorry. I offered a weak smile, and as she turned away, I swiftly exchanged her tubes for the mustard from my purse. My hands moved with practiced precision, as though I had rehearsed the maneuver countless times. Entering the hospital room, a tube of mustard in hand, I affected concern. Julian, Allison, are you quite well? Allison lay in bed, her hair dishevelled, her eyes reddened, unable to meet my gaze. Julian, still pale, stammered, Juliet, I can explain. I cut him off before he could continue. Placing the tube of mustard on the bedside table, I departed. Moments later, a piercing scream emanated from the room. Allison, covering her face, cried out, "It burns! My skin is on fire!" Julian writhed on the bed, cursing, "What in the blazes is this? Who did this?" The entire hallway erupted in commotion. Patients and their families emerged to observe. An elderly woman whispered to her son, "It's them, the couple from the video this morning on the internet, the father-in-law and the daughter-in-law. What a scandal." Another added, "They deserve it." The doctor rushed into the room, instructing the nurses to cleanse their skin and apply a neutralizing agent. However, the public humiliation of Julian and Allison had already occurred, an irreversible cascade. Mrs. Peterson's video of them being transported on stretchers had circulated widely throughout the neighborhood and across social media platforms. I stood in the hallway, absorbing the murmurs, feeling as though the entire world was a witness to the downfall of these 2 betrayers. As the crowd dispersed, Daniel entered the room, a thick folder in his hand. I had summoned him as soon as the ambulance departed, instructing him to retrieve the envelope containing the evidence I had secured in the drawer, along with the 2 divorce decrees I had prepared. He handed me the folder, his gaze vacant, offering no words. I opened it, extracted the documents, and placed them on the table before Julian and Allison. Meeting Daniel's eyes directly, my voice was cold yet resolute. 40 years of marriage conclude here. Sign these and then depart from my son's life and mine. Do as you wish, but vanish. Allison collapsed in tears, looking at Daniel. "Honey, please forgive me. I made a mistake. I beg you, forgive me." Daniel, however, merely observed her, his expression as unyielding as stone, and departed without a word. Julian attempted to grasp my hand, his voice trembling. "Juliet, listen to me. I did not intend for this." I pulled away, interrupting him. "Do not utter another word, Julian. You chose this path." He cried out in desperation, "Juliet, please." But the nurse intervened, admonishing, "Be quiet. This is a hospital." I turned and walked away, not looking back. In the hallway, I saw Daniel leaning against the wall, his head buried in his hands. I approached and placed a hand on his shoulder, but he did not look up. "Mom," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Why did it have to be Dad? Why her?" I offered no reply, merely embracing him tightly, sharing his sorrow with my own. In that moment, I understood that Julian and Allison had forfeited everything, their integrity, their union, and even their deceitful scheme. But Daniel and I, too, had lost a family. My only hope was that, with the passage of time, we might find some semblance of peace. Several weeks after the scandal, my bakery experienced an unprecedented surge in patronage. The small bell above the door chimed incessantly as customers entered and exited, their faces alight with smiles and compliments. "Juliet, you possess such fortitude," remarked Mrs. Peterson, clutching a bag of freshly baked flan. "The entire neighborhood admires your strength in defending your family business amidst such unpleasantness." I offered a smile and my thanks. The community rallied behind me. I was lauded as a strong woman, yet only I knew that my resilience stemmed from the shattered fragments of my heart. Each time my gaze fell upon the oven where I had toiled with sweat and tears for 40 years, I recalled Julian and Allison, who had sought to strip me of everything, but ultimately failed. And here I remain, with my bakery, with Daniel, and with a renewed chapter of life. Daniel moved in with me immediately following that fateful day. He spoke little of the events, but I observed the subtle transformation. He was no longer the jovial, ever-laughing Daniel of before. His eyes now held a profound depth, as if burdened by an unhealed wound. "Mum, I'd like to stay here for a while," he confided on his first night, his suitcase in hand. "I'll help you manage the bakery, interact with customers, whatever you require." I embraced him, feeling the warmth of the son I had nurtured, and simply nodded, asking nothing further. I understood that Daniel needed time, as did I. Each morning we opened the bakery together. I would tend to the oven and arrange the pastries, while Daniel managed invoices and communicated with hotels and restaurants. "Mum, the Grand Hotel wishes to increase their pastry order for the upcoming week," he announced from the cash register, his tone calm but lacking its former buoyancy. "Very well," I replied. "Confirm the order. I will prepare additional dough." These simple moments afforded me a tranquility I had not experienced in years. The disingenuous glances from Julian and the saccharine, manipulative tone of Allison were absent. It was simply Daniel and I tending to what remained. Our dinners became an intimate affair for two. We sat opposite each other in the modest kitchen, sharing simple repasts. Occasionally rice with beans and chicken, other times merely bread and coffee. "Mum, could you make me some flan this weekend?" he inquired one evening, a faint smile gracing his lips, the first I had seen since the scandal. "Certainly," I responded, a sense of relief washing over me, "but you must assist me in stirring the caramel." He nodded. In that instant I felt a glimmer of hope, a sense that we were slowly yet surely finding our footing. I began to carve out time for myself, a luxury I had almost entirely neglected over 40 years. I joined a culinary club at the community centre, where women my age exchanged recipes and shared their life experiences. "Juliet, your flan is simply the best in the neighbourhood," exclaimed a woman, laughing as I presented a tray. I replied with a smile, "It's a small technique I picked up back in San Diego." I also resumed attending church on weekends. I would sit in quiet contemplation, the light of the stained glass windows illuminating my face, praying not for Julian or Allison, but for Daniel, for myself, that we might find the strength to persevere. Sometimes I would embark on leisurely strolls with Mrs. Peterson through the town square, listening to her recount neighbourhood anecdotes. "You know, Juliet," she would say, her eyes alight, "everyone is still discussing Julian and Allison, but they acknowledge you as the victor." I would simply smile, offering no verbal affirmation. "Perhaps I won," I mused, "but the cost was the loss of my entire family." Daniel too underwent a transformation. He became less reserved, beginning to share details of his work as a firefighter. "We extinguished a fire at the market yesterday," he recounted one evening during dinner. "It was exceedingly perilous, Mum, but thankfully no one sustained any injuries." I listened, my heart swelling with pride. "Please exercise caution," I implored, my voice quivering. "You are all I have left." Daniel met my gaze with tenderness. "Do not worry, Mum, I will never leave you alone." Those words were a balm to my soul, rekindling my faith that despite my profound losses, I still had my son, who would forever remain by my side. One afternoon, as the bakery bustled with customers, I sat at the cash register, observing the activity on the street. The bell above the door rang incessantly. The aroma of sweet bread permeated the air. My gaze swept across the trays laden with flan and pastries, and I reflected on the entire journey. I had built this bakery with my own hands, evolving from a young girl in San Diego into a woman who understood perseverance. Julian and Allison had attempted to seize everything from me, but they had failed. I retained my bakery. I retained Daniel. And most crucially, I retained myself. Did you enjoy my narrative? And from which city are you tuning in? Let's connect in the comments. If this story resonated with you, your support through super thanks would enable me to continue sharing similar narratives. I deeply appreciate your kind encouragement. I eagerly await your thoughts on the story. On your screen, you will find 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. My channel offers a wealth of additional content. Please remember to subscribe. Until our next life story, with love and profound respect.